Hello friends, very good morning. Welcome to the Hindu editorial analysis. The title of today's editorial says Reset Mode. This is with reference to GST Council and its style of functioning. So recently GST Council met over 2 days to discuss several pending issues. And this editorial describes about the outcomes of the meetings and the way forward. So you all know that editorials play a very important role for UPSC preparation. So before getting into the editorial, let's look at some background to this particular article. So let's look at what is a GST Council. It is important that we understand all the facts behind an editorial and then start reading it. So here we are talking about GST Council. So let's look at what is a GST Council and how did it come about. So we are going to talk about GST Council. So before talking about GST Council, I would like to remind you about GST. Earlier we used to have separate taxes for states as well as union or center. Center used to charge taxes on issues in union list or center list, and states used to charge taxes or levy taxes on items in state list. This list is available in Schedule 7 of the Constitution. So states had the authority to levy taxes on the items in state list, and center had the authority to levy taxes on the items in union list. Then states and center came together and they decided to come out with one nation, one tax. Instead of separate taxes on state list and union list, let's have only one tax for entire country, and that one tax came out to be GST, Goods and Services Tax. Once this came into picture, all the items have been categorized into two categories: GST items and non-GST items, right? So GST Council, now let's talk about GST Council and how GST tax system came into effect. We discussed the concept, now we are going to look at how it came into effect, right? So we have to go back to 2016. So in 2016, in the Parliament, 122nd Constitutional Amendment Bill was introduced. I am saying Constitutional Amendment Bill. It is not an act. It is a bill. It was passed by the Parliament, by both houses of the Parliament in 2016. It was introduced and Parliament passed both in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. So Parliament passed the bill. When I am saying Parliament passed the bill, with what majority? That should be the next question. Because it is not a simple bill. It is not a simple bill. It is a constitutional amendment bill. So it should follow a separate approval procedure, right? So what is the approval procedure for constitutional amendment bills? We need something called special majority. We need something called special majority, not normal majority. And this special majority also should be, what is the special majority? 2/3 of those present and voting, and this number has to be greater than absolute majority, which is half of total strength of the house. Half of total strength of the house. All this is mentioned in Article 368. All this stems from Article 368 of the Constitution. We will discuss all of them in detail. So before that, I would also like to remind you that this GST tax system affects the federal structure. Because center is not the only party involved here. States are also involved. States' revenues are also going to be affected because of this new tax regime. Since federal structure is getting affected, it has to follow that Apart from getting special majority in the parliament, there is one more condition that needs to be fulfilled. What is that? More than 50% of the states, more than 50% of the states must ratify with simple majority. With simple majority. So it is not going to be enough if it is passed in the parliament. We need to have ratification by at least 50% of the state legislatures with simple majority. So let's try to understand what these majorities as well. I'll take a small example and then try to explain. Let's say in Lok Sabha, on that particular day, there were 500 attendees. So present is 500. Let's say the total strength of the Lok Sabha is 540. I am taking example, I am not putting exact figures. Let's say the total strength of the Lok Sabha 540 and those present on that particular day is 500, and those who participated in voting, that is present and voting, let's say it comes out to be 444. So then what is this 2/3 of present and voting? Just make a quick math. 2/3 of present and voting, which means 444 multiplied by 2 divided by 3, it comes to 296, right? So 2/3 of present and voting comes to 296 as per our example. And here there is something else. Half of total strength. What is total strength? 540. Half of total strength is 270. More than that means at least more than 270. It should be more than 270 or greater than or equal to 271. When this happens, that means the parliament has passed the bill, and the next thing, the bill goes to different states, and states also must ratify with simple majority. What is the meaning of simple majority? Simple majority is nothing but more than 50% of those present and voting, whoever were present on that particular day, and plus those who participated in voting on that particular day, more than 50% of those members should say yes to the bill. Only when these two things happen, we say that condition 1 and condition 2 are fulfilled, right? And then it moves to next stage, which is assent by president. After states also ratify, then president's assent is the next step. So is there any possibility that president doesn't give his assent? No, because president doesn't have veto power. He doesn't have veto power over constitutional amendment bills. He has to approve them. He doesn't have any other option. He has to approve them. He doesn't have veto power. So this way, in 2016, this constitutional amendment bill, 122nd constitutional amendment bill, was approved by the president finally. It was approved by the president finally, and 101 Constitutional Amendment Act. It became 101 Constitutional Amendment Act. I hope you have got it right. So now the Constitution was amended. Constitution was amended, and there was a new article. There was a new Article 279A1, and this article gives president. This article gives president an authority to form GST council. GST council can be formed, right? This article gave the authority to president to form a GST council, and GST council obviously is a joint forum. It is a joint forum, which means there will be representatives from the center as well as state. From center, you will have Union Finance Minister, who also acts as chairperson, plus Union Minister of State for Finance. He is another member from central government. From the state side, states can nominate one minister. That minister can be Minister of Finance or any other. Can be any other minister as well. So states can nominate their members to GST Council as well. So what is the objective of GST Council? To make recommendations. The objective of GST Council is to make recommendations with respect to several issues related to GST, like rate structures or tabs, which items to be exempted, which items to be charged extra GST, all these things. So GST Council makes all these recommendations. And there is a news item. Something happened very recently. Supreme Court delivered a judgment very recently saying that recommendations or the decision of GST Council are not binding on states. Which means states need not follow the recommendations or the final decisions taken by GST Council. This was a very recent judgment of Supreme Court. Very, very important aspect. Keep this in mind. It is not binding on states. This is what Supreme Court said very, very recently. But it will have persuasive value. Obviously, GST Council is a constitutional body. Decision comes out only after deliberations. So, states in general respect its decision. That doesn't mean it is binding. They don't have any other option. It is not binding on them. So, states have an issue. Let's try to understand this aspect also. States always complain that generally center is imposing its will on states. How? GST Council's voting pattern, if you look at it, 1/3 votes belongs to center, only 2/3 belongs to all states combined. Center alone has 1/3 voting, 1/3 of weightage of votes, and all states combined 2/3. You might say all states combined is more than center, but this all states, they also include BJP ruled states or states of the party which is ruling center. So obviously whatever center wants will be done. So that is how center is imposing its will on states. That's the complaint of states over a period of time. Now the Supreme Court judgment is giving some hope to states. Right? If you don't like it, you don't need to follow. It is not binding on you. So it gives some comfort. It is giving some comfort to states. I want you to keep this in your mind as background, and now let's begin the editorial. All my editorial explanation will be line by line, word by word, with background explanation. Right? So whenever you complete this, you will there are a lot of takeaways. So pay full attention to every word I speak, everything that I mention. GST's metamorphosis into a truly good and simple tax needs more center states dialogue. What is the meaning of metamorphosis? Metamorphosis means complete transformation. GST, goods and services tax, it has to be transformed into a truly good and simple tax. It must be a tax which does good to everyone involved, and it should be simple. If it has to be transformed into a truly good and simple tax, it requires more dialogue between center and states. So center and states need to sit together and talk to each other. Only then things will be resolved and GST transforms into a truly good and simple tax. The GST Council met over 2 days this week. Its first regular meeting after a 9-month break, with much on its plate stemming from 4 ministerial groups' recommendations to fix various aspects of the indirect tax regime that remains a work in progress 5 years on. It's a beautiful sentence, and whenever there is a key word that comes, I want you to pay full attention to the keyword. So in this sentence, if you understand, it says GST Council met over 2 days this week simple language, you can easily understand. It's first regular meeting after a 9-month break. You can understand this as well. They are meeting after a 9-month break with much on its plate, which means there are a lot of things that need to be decided. There are a lot of things that need to be decided. There are a lot of things that are pending before it. How did all these lot of things came into picture? How did they come into picture? They were stemming from 4 ministerial groups recommendations, right? 4 ministerial groups recommended certain things to fix various aspects of GST regime. They recommended certain changes. So GST Council needs to sit together, go through all the recommendations and decide whether to implement those recommendations or not, right? That is something pending in front of before GST Council. Now there is a keyword, indirect tax regime. I want you to understand, regime means system of governance. What is this indirect tax? I will try to simplify it for you. So taxes, if you see, they are of 2 types, direct tax and indirect tax. Direct, indirect tax. How do we differentiate a direct tax from an indirect tax? I want you to look at 2 keywords, 2 important keywords. First one is incidence. Second one is impact. Keep this in mind. So let's take an example of income tax. So there is a person who is a salaried employee, right? Government is charging tax on his income. So the incidence is on whom? The incidence is on the person. And who is going to bear the impact of it? Again, the same person. If the government is charging 30%, so it is charging the person's income. So incidence is on the person, and obviously he has to face the impact of the tax. This is direct. And what is indirect? Let's say government has decided to increase the taxes on soaps, and there is a company which manufactures this soap. The government has decided to increase the tax on soap. So now the incidence is on the soap and not on the person. But the impact of the increase on the tax of the soap will fall definitely on the person using it, the end consumer. Are you getting it? So impact is on the consumer, incidence is on the soap. So the incidence of tax on soap is indirectly impacting the consumer, and that is the reason we call it indirect tax. So GST is a tax on different goods and services that we use. That is the reason we call it an indirect tax, unlike income tax or corporate tax, which are direct in nature. So this new indirect tax regime, there are certain aspects which needed to be fixed, and there were certain ministerial recommendations that came, and GST Council meeting was supposed to sit, discuss and fix those issues. That was the agenda item. And this GST Council meeting ratified 3 of the 4 reports. Out of the 4, they ratified, which means approved 3 of the 4 reports, and put off means postpone 1 for further deliberations. We need to discuss more. There was another item which needs further deliberations, which means more discussions are required on that based on concerns raised by a state. One state raised certain concerns. They were not happy on some issues, though they flagged or highlighted certain issues. So council decided, let's sit together again, see here, with a commitment to reassemble and resolve the impasse holistically in little over a month. In little over a month, let's reassemble, okay, and resolve this impasse. Impasse is any issue that is not seeing a solution, that is not seeing a resolution, something that gets stuck, that neither moves forward nor moves backward. So this issue is being unresolved. So let's meet together again and look at it holistically, means comprehensively from all angles, and then try to resolve. See, I'll put a lot of focus on the vocabulary as well. Unless you improve your language skills, it is very difficult to comprehend editorials comprehensively. So pay attention whenever I am explaining certain difficult words. I'm giving meanings to those difficult words as well. When you read editorials on a daily basis over a period of time, let's say 3 to 6 months time, you will not need me at all. You can read editorials on your own. That is the objective of this exercise, taking this much time explaining every word line by line, as well as giving context to what is happening there and giving background information as well. A new ministerial panel is being tasked with figuring out the long pending constitution of an appellate tribunal for GST disputes. To move ahead, very important aspect. So they are trying to come out with a solution for one long pending issue. What is this long pending issue? Constitution of an appellate tribunal for GST disputes. Very important sentence. So pay attention here. I'll give you some background to this as well. See, here there are two keywords. One is tribunal. The other one is appellate. You need to look at every word and try to understand it in detail. What is a tribunal? In simple terms, tribunal is a special court which is generally tasked with resolving certain special issues. Only certain type of issues. For example, National Green Tribunal. It only handles issues related to environment, pollution, etc. Let's say Debt Recovery Tribunal. It handles issues with respect to recovery of debt by the banks. Whenever a bank gives loan to a company and the company doesn't pay it on time, it becomes NPA, bank can approach DRT for recovery of money. So that tribunal doesn't look at any other cases. That is tribunal. When I say GST appellate tribunal, which means this tribunal is only going to look at cases related to GST and nothing else. It is only going to look at cases related to GST and nothing else. So appellate, what is the meaning of appellate? Appellate means not as the first instance but as an appeal. See, GST law, if you look at GST law, it has certain provisions. For example, you are a person and you are owner of a company, or you are an individual, you are running a small company or whatever it is, and you are not happy with a certain tax that has been charged on you. So you might go and charge a complaint. Right. First it goes to someone called appellate authority. Right. He is within the tax system. He is a person. Right. He gives a judgment. He gives an order. This is appellate authority's order. In general, there is someone above him, higher officer. We call him revision authority. Let's say if the order given by appellate authority is incorrect or erroneous, then this revision authority can modify it. He has the authority to modify it and he can give his order, which is revision order. And the law says, if you are not happy with either the appellate authority's order or the revision order, the person can approach GST appellate tribunal. Here we are talking about appellate authority. Here we are talking about appellate tribunal. So which means the person can approach this tribunal. And tribunal can also have two tiers of branches: national, regional, state, area wide. So they can have two kinds of benches at two tiers. Once, if you are still not happy with appellate tribunal's judgment, you can then go to High Court. High Court is the next court of appeal. If you are still not happy with High Court, you can finally approach Supreme Court. This is what GST law says. Unfortunately, these GST appellate tribunals were not constituted even today. GST came into effect GST came into effect on 1st July 2017. Even today, the appellate tribunals were not set up. So that's what they are saying here. Right? Long pending constitution of an appellate tribunal for GST disputes. So to decide on that, a new ministerial panel is being tasked about it. So they were given the task. Based on an interim report of a panel to rationalize tax rates, exemptions have been scrapped on several items and rates altered for others to correct inverted duty structures. Oh my God, every sentence comes with a keyword. So let's look at every keyword that comes here. So what is the meaning of the word rationalize? Rationalize means making corrections. I will give you an example. In a state, let's say there is a school where there are only 10 children, government school, only 10 children are going to that school, and let's say there are 5 teachers. Do you need 5 teachers to handle 10 children? Definitely not. So there is excess staff there. Obviously, we have excess staff in that school. Let's say there is another school where there are 100 students but only 2 teachers, which means there is a shortage of staff there. Now, when I say rationalization to this particular situation, what does that mean? You remove excess staff from where they are not required and put them in a place where they are required. So wherever you need more people, you put them there. Wherever people are not needed, remove. So you are trying to rationalize it. When we look at the word here, rationalize tax rates, which means wherever there are excess tax rates, if the GST council feels we are unnecessarily charging very high tax rates here, reduce it. If you feel that there are some areas where we are not charging enough, then raise. That is called rationalization. So there is a panel. That panel gave an interim report. Based on the report on that panel to rationalize tax rates, certain exemptions have been scrapped. Earlier, there used to be some exemptions on certain items. Those exemptions have now been scrapped completely, and rates altered for others to correct inverted duty structures. So there is an issue called inverted duty structure, and they've changed or altered the GST rates to correct that anomaly of inverted duty structure. Now we need to understand what is this inverted duty structure. Let's not leave anything. Let's try to understand everything that is mentioned in the editorial. So they are talking about inverted duty structures. I will give you one example. I will try to explain this using an example. Today, our institute, LTX classes, this is our logo, LTX Infinity. Our institutes, we are offering UPSC coaching to so many students, right? So for offering these services, for giving online courses, we need to use certain softwares. We are using certain softwares and certain inputs. While paying for these inputs, obviously we will have to pay their fee plus taxes, right? We pay their fee plus taxes. So these companies who are offering services to LTX classes, they take their fee and they deposit the tax that I am paying to them to government. They deposit the tax that we are paying to them to government. When they deposit, they attach it to our GST number. Every organization which is under the ambit of GST will have a unique GST number. So LTX classes also has a GST number, and with this GST number, these taxes are attached, right? So let's assume this tax amount comes out to be 10,000 rupees. Let's take an example. This tax amount comes out to be 10,000 rupees. This 10,000 rupees is now maintained in the government records as input tax credit. Input tax credit of LTX classes. So LTX classes has a credit of 10,000 rupees, and this 10,000 rupees came from input tax, which means taxes paid on inputs of their services. Taxes paid on the inputs of their services. Keep this in mind. Now LTX classes offers coaching services to most of the students, and students make payments to LTX classes. When they make payment, the fee component also includes GST. The fee component also includes GST, and we are supposed to pay this GST amount again to government. Let's say in this manner, if we are supposed to pay around 20,000 rupees to government, now government says you already have 10,000 rupees with us as input tax credit, so let's deduct that. You need not pay that. It is already there, and you can only pay remaining 10,000. You pay us just 10,000 rupees. The problem resolved. So this 10,000 rupees is output tax, and this 20,000 is output tax, and this is input tax. Is there any problem in this? No problem. When I make payment to government, I will deduct the 10,000. I pay only 10,000. Instead of paying 20,000, I am deducting 10 and paying only 10,000. Let's say if there is a case where my input tax credit is 20,000 and output tax liability is 10,000, which means my 20,000 is lying with the government as input tax. Now I am only supposed to pay 10,000 to government. This is a reverse situation or inverted situation. I have to pay 10,000 to government, but the government already has 20,000 of my cash. So even if I remove this 10,000, still 10,000 of my money still lies with government, and now I have to apply for refund. I have to go for a long process of refund to get this 10,000 back. Are you getting this? This is called inverted duty structure, wherein the output tax is less than input tax and your money remains with the government. And this situation is prevalent especially in textile segment. Right? The output tax on textiles is lesser compared to the input tax on their raw materials. So this way they are depositing lot of input tax credit with the government, but they are unable to get it back. So to correct this anomaly, the government has decided or altered the taxes, which means they have increased output taxes and reduced input taxes, so that this anomaly gets corrected. I hope you have understood the inverted duty structure concept. So whenever they use a word, we need to understand what happens at the background. So altered means changed. This may translate into higher prices on many goods and services and reductions for a few. It may translate into higher prices. Obviously, some goods and services will have higher taxes now, and a few will have lesser taxes now from July 18. Although their impact on inflation is difficult to ascertain right now. So we never know. We don't know how these rate changes will impact the inflation. Inflation is a very, 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 very pertinent, problematic issue right now. So when you are tinkering with the taxes, when you are changing the rates, it might also impact inflation. We don't know the impact as yet. However, a larger restructuring of the GST's multiple rate structure with an increase in levies to bolster revenues that have fallen short of expectations, partly due to rate cuts earlier effected as electoral tools, has been put off. Very good sentence, very important sentence. I want you to pay full attention here. Look at it. So they planned something called a larger restructuring of GST's multiple rate structure. So they wanted to change the rate slabs which are already there, like 5%, 12%, 18%. They wanted to change 28%. Earlier, before elections, governments, what did they do? They gave certain rate cuts. They reduced the tax rates on certain items. They used them as electoral tools to gain the confidence of people. They reduced taxes on certain goods earlier, because of which revenues have fallen short of expectations. We are not getting revenues that are expected. In order to bolster means strengthen. In order to strengthen those revenues, government was planning to increase levies, which means they were trying to increase taxes on most of the items. But right now that plan has been put off, which means it has been postponed. For now it has been postponed. With inflation expected to remain buoyant, that exercise may have to wait longer. Right now inflation is not in comfortable zone. Right? Inflation has to be within 2% to 6% bracket as per monetary. That was the mandate of Monetary Policy Committee given to them by Government of India. Unfortunately, right now inflation is not under control. It is buoyant, which means it is quite high right now. So until inflation comes down, we may need to wait to bring in such large scale changes in GST rate structures. So with this we are done with first paragraph. Let's look at the second para. Apart from the fine print of the council's decisions, which include tighter norms on the horizon for registering new firms and closing of tax evasion loopholes, there is a more critical takeaway. This is a beautifully written sentence I want you to pay full attention to. There is this word called fine print. What is the meaning of fine print? Whenever you see a report, see a document, there are certain things which are mentioned in bigger font, and there are some sentences which are deliberately mentioned in smaller font. The idea is to obscure, the idea is to make sure that those lines are not highlighted. So they might not be some positive news items, they might not be things which make you happy, but they need to be announced. So organizations and governments, what do? They keep certain things in fine print, which means at a lesser or smaller font. So if you look at that fine print, there are some decisions of the council like tighter norms on the horizon for registering new firms. Going forward, if you want to register a new firm under GST, the norms are going to be tighter. On the horizon means upcoming. On the horizon means imminent, impending, about to happen. So we are going to have tighter norms for registering new firms. And also they are also trying to close certain tax evasion loopholes. Right now some companies are using loopholes in the present tax system and they are evading tax. Evading means not paying. Using those loopholes, they are not paying, they are evading. So government, now the GST council is also trying to fix those loopholes. Apart from these two, there is a more critical takeaway. What is the takeaway? Let's see. That the deliberations were constructive and not combative. Beautiful sentence, right? Deliberations mean the discussions between states and the center this time were not combative. That means they were not fighting. The discussions were constructive. They were positive. Both of them were taking others' opinions into considerations. They were listening to one another's views and incorporating those inputs while moving forward, especially amid the brewing trust deficit between the center and states in the past few meetings and the prolonged pause since it last met. All this bodes well for the necessary next steps to make GST deliver on its original hopes. So look at this sentence. The sentence says amid, which means in the middle of, the brewing trust deficit between the center and the states. Trust deficit has been brewing for quite some time. It is growing. Every day by day, states are no longer trusting center. States are of the view that center is not taking their issues into consideration, is not catering to their concerns. That has been the view of states for quite some time, and this meeting also is happening after a prolonged pause, which means the states were not positive coming into the meeting. In such situations, what happens in general? There will be a lot of fights, there will be a lot of blame games. But luckily, positively this time around, there were no such blame games, there were no such combats, but the meeting went in a constructive manner. And this happening of the meeting in a constructed manner bodes well, which means augurs well. It's a good sign for the next steps, necessary next steps to make GST deliver on its original hopes. Whatever were the objectives of GST when it was launched, to deliver on those objectives, both center and states need to work together. In this meeting that happened. So it's a good sign or a positive sign that even in future meetings this will continue and GST will come close to delivering on its promise. Not a single member raised the recent Supreme Court order. We discussed this Supreme Court order, right? That some states believed had upheld their rights against arbitrary imposition of the center's decision in the council. States always felt that center is arbitrarily imposing its will. Arbitrarily means without any logic, without any reason. Whatever center feels, it is imposing its will on the states without any logic. That has been the feeling of states. And Supreme Court also in a recent judgment stated that GST Council's decision is not binding on the states. So states felt happy. If the decision of the GST Council is not to my liking, I will not obey. They had this opportunity. Even though they had this opportunity, not even a single state, not even a single member spoke about it in the meeting, which means the meeting went well. If the state started talking about Supreme Court judgment and started cornering center, then it will lead to a combative atmosphere, right? Instead of that, if they never raise the topic of Supreme Court judgment and spoke in a friendly manner, it's a good sign. It's a good thing that happened. Moreover, over a dozen states brought up an extra agenda item. What is extra agenda item? Something that was not in original agenda but that was brought in later on. What is that? Their anxieties about the sunset of assured revenue growth from July 1st, on which even ministers from BJP ruled states spoke up to seek the continuance of GST compensation for some years. You need to understand this as well. Let's go back to 2017. In 2017, when the center wanted to bring in this GST, states raised some concerns, right, between 2016 and 2017. They were concerned that as of then, they were under VAT regime. VAT was directly under their control. They used to have a certain amount of revenue coming in every year, and that revenue also used to grow year on year. Now, when you're changing the entire rate structure, when you're changing the entire tax system from VAT to GST, you never know what the new revenue was going to be, right? Earlier, let's say if the state was earning 1 lakh crore under VAT regime, once GST comes in, you never know whether the 1 lakh crore would become 1.2 lakh crore or would become 80,000 crore. So states expressed their concern. The government assured that for a period of 5 years, from 2017 to 2022, I will compensate any shortfall, which means whatever was expected in the earlier regime and whatever you are getting in GST regime. If there is a difference, the center will compensate it. That is GST compensation. So center promised this GST compensation for a period of 5 years. GST came into effect on 1st July 2017. Now with 1st July 2022, 5 years are over. Now there is a sunset for that class. Sunset means it's over. So states are now expressing their anxiety. What happens now? Suppose if our revenue goes down, will you compensate? As per the rule, the center need not compensate. The center need not compensate. But states are worried. So they express their anxiety to the center, and the center, and not just non-BJP states, even BJP ruled states also spoke up about it. They were seeking continuance of GST compensation. So please continue this compensation for some more years. Please don't stop it. All our developmental projects will get stuck if the revenues, right, get stuck. That's what all the states requested the center, right? that states are no longer driven by party whips in this critical forum should enrich the quality of dialogue. The good thing about this particular thing is even BJP ruled states also spoke, which means the states were speaking on behalf of the people of their state to preserve the interests of the state and their people instead of blindly following what their party leaders were saying. That is a good sign, right? They are no longer driven by the party whips. Whip is an official order given by the party high command. In this critical forum, it should enrich the quality of dialogue, which means whenever there is a discussion, the discussion will be solely based on the interests of the state and center and not the party and outcomes. Outcome means result. So quality of dialogue and outcomes will definitely improve going forward. That the center heard them out. What did the center do? Center heard them out. It did not play a blind ear. Instead of that, deaf ear. Instead of playing a deaf ear, it completely heard them out and left the issue open. It did not say no, it did not say yes, but it kept the issue for a future deliberation. Unlike the last council meet, when its response was akin to outright no, in the last council, center gave a response which was similar to saying no. States were not happy, but this time around, the center did not say no, it kept it pending. And that is the most refreshing thing in this particular meeting, right? That means center is listening and taking states' concerns into consideration. Now, taking a clear call, either one way or the other, which means either continuing GST compensation or going away with it. Right? On continuing this support will be ideal for the center and states to plan their fiscal math better. If center says we will continue, states will say we will get this much amount from center, we can plan these activities. If center says it is no longer going to be continued, then states will plan their budget in a different manner. Our income will go down, so we have to cut down certain items. So in order for them to plan their fiscal math better, so center has to say yes or no instead of postponing it further and further. Just as sustaining and nurturing this fledgling federal compact, see this sentence. Compact means a formal agreement between two or more parties. Federal means involving center and state. Fledgling means something that is in the initial stages. It is still the 5th year, right? 2017 GST came into picture. We are currently in the 6th year. Today 2nd July, so 6th year. 5 years got over. It is still in early stages. So sustaining and nurturing this compact is critical to make GST work better for all. Only when you sustain it, only when you nurture it, which means you always listen to all the problems and try to give resolutions. Okay, only when you do that, that makes GST work better for all. Similarly, the central government should take a clear call. Only then states can plan for their fiscal math in a better way. That's what they are trying to say at the end. I hope you have understood every line, every word in this. You would have gained some good amount of vocabulary and some background information as well. Right? Only when you understand an editorial in such a detailed manner, it enriches your UPSC preparation. So many students might feel reading this, spending so much time on a single article could be a waste of time, but the amount of learning that you are getting from this single editorial, if you are reading this way, will help you in the long run. When you do it on a daily basis, over a period of time, you need not spend so much time on single editorial. You will be able to read it on your own. You can finish this entire reading within 15 minutes with all the exam related background as well as good amount of vocabulary. That's about it. Take care. Bye-bye.